want to share bits of this article that I found while I was doing research for my weekly Patreon episode, which will be out shortly. I had been thinking about the Diana comparisons to the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle paparazzi incident in New York City, and not necessarily the events that happened. What I was curious in was public sentiment before and after, how media changed, and unfortunately, how little we've learned. This is a Time Magazine article by Kate Samuelson from August 27th, 2017. So 2017, Harry and Meghan are dating. They are not yet married. And I want to look at some quotes that I found really interesting. First, some quotes from Charles Spencer, her brother, who spoke at her funeral in 1997. Quote, "He left mourners in no doubt who he blamed, describing his sister as the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate." End quote. He goes on to say, quote, "We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair." End quote. This is from after Diana's death and how the public mood turned against the paparazzi and the media, who they overwhelmingly blamed for Princess Diana's death. Quote, 8 days after Diana's death, presumably in a bid to retain popularity, the Daily Mail pledged to ban paparazzi photos from its pages, a promise which is not reflected in the paper and its affiliated website 20 years later, end quote. The same Daily Mail that bought and published those photos of Harry and Meghan as they were trying to escape the paparazzi in New York. 26 years later, and no change. We also have a quote from the CEO of Backgrid. Backgrid being the photo agency that the paparazzi worked for in this Harry and Meghan chase. But first I wanted to see if David Taylor was still the CEO of Backgrid. I also want to make note that Backgrid is shown as two separate words. When I've done searches, I can't find another Backgrid that is spelled that way. I find it as one word, so I'm not sure if this was just a mistake. It happens, but I just wanted to make that clarification. Here is David Taylor. According to his LinkedIn, he is still the co-CEO of Backgrid. Backgrid is based in the US, UK, Australia. It also explains on their website how they include powerhouse agencies such as Exposure. This leads me to believe it's the same Backgrid. Here's what he has to say in 2017. Quote, "I've seen a lot of changes during my time in the industry. These legal Rottweilers now come at us and say things like, we want this, we want that. We want to make sure you don't publish this picture. You now have to be really careful that you're not doing things deemed as harassment or surveillance." End quote. Charming. Legal Rottweilers. It's an interesting article. It explores the way British media has and has not changed. It's also a reminder of how much perhaps the lessons of 1997 have not stayed with us.